Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Gardener. And thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's November 20th. Today, we celebrate the botanist who started the Botanical Gazette back in 1875 and the incredibly down to earth yet inspiring garden designer and writer who turns 90 years old today. We learn about the naming error that was based on the name of an early governor of Florida and the almost 500 watercolors by a St. Louis botanist that languished undiscovered until the late 1980s. We'll hear some relatable thoughts about the garden in Prose About November. And we grow that garden library with a book that teaches us to turn our carrot stumps and cilantro sprigs into plants. I'll talk about adding natural elements to your holiday planters. And then we'll wrap things up with a sweet story about the world's smallest rose garden. But first, let's catch up on a few recent events. The Telegraph recently shared a post that's called How to Protect Your Crops from Winter Cold the Sustainable Way. This post was written by Jack Wallington. He's the author of a new book that I'll be featuring later this year. And he said in this post, Horticultural Fleece is a veg plot wonder. Yes, it is. If you haven't tried protecting your crops with horticultural fleece, you're in for a treat. This post from Jack is very helpful. It offers a number of different solutions. And he adds that gardeners should look to move away from plastic cloches to more sustainable options like glass and fabric. So stay warm and keep gardening. Then the Inklings News shared an inspiring story about a horticulture club that was started in a school. And the post talked about all of the wonderful mental health benefits of gardening. After I read the article, I shared the post on Twitter and in the Facebook group, and I said, students must deal with increasing amounts of stress. No doubt, I've got 4 of my own. Meanwhile, greenhouses in schools are seldom used. Put the two together, and you have a recipe for success. I say, bring horticulture into the schools. Just 30 minutes of gardening a week means happier people at any age. Now, if you'd like to check out these curated posts for yourself, you're in luck because I share all of it with the listener community in the free Facebook group, the Daily Gardener Community. So the next time you're on Facebook, just search for that, the Daily Gardener Community, request to join, and I'll admit you in the group. See you there. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of John Merle Coulter, who was born on this day in 1851. In November of 1875, Coulter founded the Botanical Gazette. A year-long subscription cost just $1. The first issue was called the Botanical Bulletin, but out of respect for the similarly named Torrey Botanical Club Bulletin, Coulter changed the name to the Botanical Gazette for the second issue, and the name stuck. At first, Coulter edited the Gazette alongside his brother Stanley, who was also a botanist. He had a number of co-editors throughout the years, and after 20 years of publication, the University of Chicago Press took control of the Botanical Gazette. Coulter remained an editor at the paper for half a century. Coulter was a lifelong friend of Asa Gray, who he also considered his most influential mentor. Coulter was a prolific writer on the subject of botany, and he collaborated on a large number of scientific books. His Handbook of Plant Dissection was often referred to as the ABC Botany Book in honor of the last names of the authors, Joseph Arthur, Charles Burns, and John Coulter, ABC. Coulter led the botany department at the University of Chicago, where he was especially impactful and beloved. A few days after his death, his widow received a volume containing testimonials from botanists around the country, along with a silver tea set in recognition of her husband's work. His students and peers had established a fellowship in his name, and they'd managed to raise over $25,000 to support future botany students. Coulter was alive to learn of these honors, but sadly he died just days before the scheduled event, which was held in his honor. And today is the 90th birthday of the garden writer and designer Penelope Hobhou, who was born on this day in 1929. When Penelope visited Tuscany, she was captivated by the villa gardens, and she began teaching herself garden design. In 2016, the New York Times ran an article where Penelope was praised for her work as a designer, and it said that Hobhou is a fixture in the minds of gardeners who love rooms and bones, the paths and walls and satisfying verticals that form a skeleton of a garden. Penelope has designed gardens all over the world, including a garden for Elizabeth the Queen Mother, an herb garden for the New York Botanical Garden, and an English cottage garden for Steve Jobs at Woodside. Gardens Illustrated recently shared a post featuring 6 of Penelope's design principles. I'll share them with you here. First, think about backgrounds. Large trees can frame the sky. Hedges provide vertical and horizontal lines. Second, create a strong framework. Penelope tends to create a strong structure or framework with looser plantings within. The architecture can be supplied by buildings, walls, steps, and pergolas, but also by plants. Third, don't overuse color. Form is more important than color, and flowers are fleeting. 4, mix plants up. Choose plants that will do well in a spot, but also plant natives. 5, repeat, repeat, repeat. To unite the house and garden and create flow, repeat hard or soft features. And finally, don't forget it's for you, and you should enjoy it. And despite all of her achievements, gardeners find Penelope relatable and personable. In a recent video, she said, "I'm still finding my way." And on this day in 1933, the Knoxville Journal shared a story called "Department Botanists Agree Too Late to Change. Lespedeza was named in error." Lespedeza is a genus of around 40 species of flowering plants in the pea family, and they're commonly known as bush clovers. The article points out that the mistaken identity dates back to 1803 when the French botanist André Michaux bestowed the name to honor the governor of Florida, who he thought was Lespedeza. But in studying the early history of the plant, a USDA botanist named P.L. Recker couldn't find a governor by that name in Florida state history. He went back into the records and found that the governor in 1788 was Cespedes, not Lespedeza. In any case, botanists agreed that it would be a mistake to correct it now, if for no other reason than it would lead to confusion with a family of tropical trees named for a professor also named Cespedes. And it was on this day in 1989 that the St. Louis Post-Dispatch shared an incredible story called "Buried Blossoms" by Patricia Rice, who shared the story of the long-lost work of the botanist August Henry Kramer. After 40 years in basements, Kramer's collection of almost 500 botanical watercolors was scrutinized by two local art appraisers. You might imagine that art appraisers become blasé about seeing another beautiful painting, but not Barbara Messing. She said, "They took my breath away. Flowering mint, California poppies, hummingbird sage, wild parsnips, whispering bells, and rare alpine flowers seemed almost fresh on the paper. Each had been meticulously painted from live botanical specimens collected by August Henry Kramer in his spare time as a fire lookout in California and Oregon. Kramer had been born in South St. Louis, but he spent his adult life in the western forests. Shortly before his death in the 1940s, he brought his paintings to his sister in St. Louis with careful notes detailing the care of the delicate watercolors. Kramer's great nephew, Art Hack, doesn't know precisely when his great uncle died or even where he was buried, but he packed Uncle Gus's box of watercolors each time he and his family moved, and every once in a while he would take them out and look at them. A few years back, Jean, Art's wife, and a volunteer at the Missouri Botanical Garden, took her husband to an art exhibit of botanical drawings at the garden. They immediately reminded him of his uncle's work. He wrote about the paintings to the garden's director, Peter Raven, who sent two staff members to look at the paintings. When the appraiser, Barbara Messing, pulled the paintings from their brown paper wrappings, it was the first time they had been seen outside the family in 40 years. After a couple of hours looking at them, she felt hot tears flowing down her face. She said, "Each drawing was so beautiful, it made me cry." In Unearthed Words, here are some thoughts on winter and fall by the artist Andrew Wyeth. I prefer winter and fall when you feel the bone structure of the landscape, the loneliness of it, the dead feeling of winter. Something waits beneath it. The whole story doesn't show. And here's November by Jan Hirschfield from Remembering Voltaire. In the evenings, I scrape my fingernails clean, hunt through old catalogs for new seed, oil work boots and shears. This garden is no metaphor, more a task that swallows you into itself, earth using, as always, everything it can. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, No Waste Kitchen Gardening by Katie Elzer Peters. The subtitle to this book is Regrow Your Leftover Greens, Stalks, Seeds, and More. Katie's book is an excellent reminder to old and young gardeners alike that much of our food is part of a cycle of growth. And thanks to Katie, we can easily tap into that cycle with confidence. It's time to stop tossing your carrot stumps, cilantro sprigs, lettuce and cabbage stalks, apple cores, and avocado pits in the trash. Katie gives you everything you need to grow successfully and repropagate produce from your kitchen scraps. With this book, you can enjoy fresh greens and herbs anytime you want. And best of all, you'll reduce food waste and save time and money. Katie's book is chock full of step-by-step photos and instruction, and the little gardeners in your home will marvel at the new plants that are created right before their eyes. Here's today's garden chore. Add natural elements to your holiday planters to create layers of interest and texture. Today I was out chiseling holes into my planters with a long screwdriver so that I could incorporate some permanent stems and seasonal items into my planters. And I was thinking about the importance of adding natural elements like twigs, nests, sticks, and even feathers to my holiday planters to give them a little more pizzazz. Bundling sticks with twine and then tucking them in among the branches looks very homey. And if you can't afford to buy birch cuttings, you can always spray paint a few larger sticks with some white paint. And just a heads up, a little goes a long way. I came up with this idea for myself a few years ago, and I decided to give it a shot. And I have to say that from the street, the cuttings definitely pass for birch. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today is the anniversary of the death of the Oregon Journal columnist and gardener Richard William Fagan, who died on this day in 1969. As gardeners, we celebrate Fagan for installing the world's smallest rose park, Mill Inns Park in Portland, on February 23, 1954. The installation coincided with Rose Planting Week. The park is 18 inches in diameter and was named after Fagan's column, which was also called Mill Inns. The name of the column Mill Inns came from Dick's passion for collecting little brevities and news items about the Pacific Northwest sawmills, thus Mill Inns. In fact, the mayor of Portland once commented, "I don't know why you invited me to talk on city affairs. Dick Fagan can tell you more than me." Mill Inns Park is really just a small plot in the middle of an empty lamppost hole on a cement divider in the street at the intersection of Southwest First and Taylor. That year, in 1954, the city of Columbus, Ohio, was claiming the title of the Rose City, an honor held by Portland for over 50 years. Portland gardeners were incensed and began planting roses all around the city. Dick got the idea for the park after spying the empty spot in the road divider from his window at the newspaper building. And his little park consisted of a single rose bush, a little wire fence, and a small wooden marker that said Mill Inns Park. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.